Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi everyone, my name is Nadita Gupta. I am a petite Indian woman with long black hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a vibrant blue today as I join you from my home in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. My pronouns are she, her, and I work as an accessibility product manager at Microsoft. Oh my goodness, I've got so much to share and connect with all of you here today. But I'm going to take us back to India. So I'm going to take us back about 15-ish years back in time. And I'd love to share a little bit about, me growing up with my grandfather and my family. So I'm part of a very close family back in India. And I was brought up with a lot of love, which I'm very grateful for. And a lot of my experiences, honestly, then have even shaped my career and who I am here today. So me and my grandfather, oh my goodness, I would go home for vacations in the summer holidays during the summer vacation times in India, and spend time with my grandparents in Gujarat. And it was a really fun time. I learned how to ride my bike there, with my uncle. And I remember one time when I was learning how to ride a bike, I fell. So here I am, bawling, crying. I fell into this little garden pit area that my grandfather used to garden. And he comes out running, screaming like, "What have you done?" And first I thought he's concerned for me. Nah, he's not concerned for me. He was concerned for his tomato plant. Oh my goodness, he was so mad. He was like, "This took me months to put together and you just fell on it and destroyed it." And my grandmother comes running. She's like, "Oh, you poor child." She's like concerned, "Are you okay?" I'm bleeding and I'm bawling out there. And he cares about his tomato plants. I get it. But he was such an academic. My grandfather has led a university, and he retired as a retired professor, and he loved to read, and really academia books. Sharing that knowledge was his passion. And one day that all changed. He fell in the bathroom and due to different complications, lost his eyesight. That was a very difficult phase, not just for him, but even for the family, because, back there, we didn't have all these magic applications like, seeing UI or all this other assistive technology that was so readily available. Sometimes you didn't even know about it, right? So to be able to support him to still lead an independent life. I mean, he was someone who, even with his walking stick, would not take your help, right? He'll go slowly, but he'll do it himself. And for him to suddenly have experienced this disability was a huge shift in how he viewed life. And a couple years later, he passed away. And that experience, really experiencing that firsthand as someone, we were all close to, always left me with this question: how might I help people like my grandfather? Right? How might we use technology to help and support people like him? So let's fast forward a couple of years. I have moved from my home in India to the United States. I'm studying electrical engineering, really excited about robots and robotics and being able to use robots to enhance human lives and human experiences. And at that moment, right, for a time, there was this phase of, oh my gosh, technology is so cool, and it's cool because it's cool. But there was a shift that happened for me where it was like, hold on a second. Tech is only cool as long as it can help people, right? And I tied it back to the question that has always been with me on how might we use technology to help people like my grandfather. So I really got excited and interested in, the interaction between humans and technology. And that kind of led me down a pathway and gave me an opportunity to apply my real world knowledge towards my first job. And so I worked in manufacturing as a controls engineer, where I owned all the systems that control the machines. Now, yes, our machines made baby wipes. They didn't do anything else, anything life saving, but it was a really good experience to just understand, how do humans interact with technology? And what are the ways for us to really make that more exciting, more user friendly, more amazing? And thinking about all of these aspects, I worked for a couple of years and really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, but after a couple of years, there was a voice that in me was like, "What are you doing, Nandita? What are you doing? Why do you wake up every single day? What do you do, and why do you do it?" And I went through this phase of thinking where I couldn't quite put a finger on it, but I realized that I don't think I was as fulfilled anymore. Right? Like engineering was cool, but somewhere I had kind of drifted away from why I got into tech in the first place. And that was such a beautiful and honestly important wake up call. So 2019, I quit my job and I decided to go back to school. And trust me, that comes with its own host of challenges. When I joined graduate school, I went to school at Georgia Tech, Georgia Institute of Technology, out of Atlanta, Georgia. And my reason for picking that school was its focus with in masters in human computer interaction. And I really wanted to do it with a focus in accessibility. Because when we talk about designing inclusive experiences for all, that includes people with disabilities. It includes people with color. It includes everyone. It includes me. It includes you. It includes all of us. And that was important, right? That was so important for me. And gosh, that was the best decision I've ever made. I've never looked back. Um, Going back and doing the transition was so fulfilling. I mean, every project I touched during those 2 years was heaven. I was able to bake in accessibility. I was able to learn. I learned something every single day. And the very first accessibility project I worked on was working with a local zoo, where we were working and brainstorming on how we can make their experiences more inclusive with a focus on people with visual disabilities. For me, that hit home because that was about designing a zoo experience for someone like my grandfather. And when you know you're waking up every single day with that sense of purpose and the why, life changes. I mean, those 2 years were some of the best and also the most challenging because that's when the pandemic hit. So I'm one of those graduates where I did almost a third-ish of my degree, third to a half of my degree when we were in person. And then overnight, our lives changed. And I remember thinking that, God, I only had funding. I only had money to do my first year. How am I going to pay for the rest of school if I can't do an on campus job? Or what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to pay for school? And that was a very challenging transition. I applied for scholarships. I mean, gosh, I feel like that could be its own discussion. But really thinking about all those different ways in which I feel I just fought. I just fought, but I knew why I was fighting. And every day was so worth it. So worth it. I mean, my internship got cancelled. I had a summer internship that didn't work out. And, I'm a firm believer in the fact that when one door closes, there's another door that opens. Sometimes you have to find it, or sometimes you have to kick that door open, but that door is going to be there. Right. And so I feel those 2 years were a lot of just figuring out what's going to make sense. And as I was thinking about what my next steps could be, I really wanted to work for a company that had a strong commitment to accessibility and disability advocacy. And Microsoft was one of them. And so I, started learning more about the company, about what they do. And, the more I learned, I mean, the mission of the company is empower each and every person on this planet to achieve more. And with our chief accessibility officer, Jenny Leigh Fleury, I mean, gosh, they have C-suite representation all the way to the top for accessibility. And that to me was a very powerful pull to want to go there. And so as I was working through school, I honestly didn't know how I was going to end up there because I didn't have an internship experience in that space directly, but I had done a lot of projects and I had done a lot of just hands-on project work. And so after I interviewed and I got in, I mean, gosh, I remember pitching myself and did I really get in? I still can't believe it. But just working with the company has been great. And, that transition going from work to school and then back to work was one of the most trying periods of my life, but also the most fulfilling because after I joined Microsoft, I mean, just learning from all the wonderful people here. Today, I am a product manager on accessibility insights, and so I lead the product. And it has been such a blessing to work with a diverse group of wonderful individuals. And I feel I can show up as my authentic self. I'm a woman of color, I'm a woman with a disability, I am an Indian woman. All my different identities can coexist peacefully, and I can be there and show up as my 100% authentic self to really make a difference. And when we talk about accessibility, right, and we talk about pushing for equity and pushing for inclusion, it's really important for me that we don't leave people with disabilities behind. We have a saying in our community, our disability community, nothing about us without us. And that's what this is about. This is about how do we make sure that accessibility is baked into all the different areas and all the different things we do, right? Let's take social media, for example. If you're about to post a picture on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, Instagram, how is someone like my grandfather going to experience that? Add an alt text, right? Add an image description. There are some really simple things we can all do, no matter who we are, where we come from, to make sure that we're building an equitable world, right? And we're using the technology and the tools around us to also help push for that. And that is what I do every single day. So my life as a product manager, I work on a product called Accessibility Insights. And our goal is to empower developers with information on how they can make their tool more accessible. So again, our motto is you don't have to be an expert in accessibility to build an accessible product, right? This is a free open source product and you can use it and run it on your websites, on your other web applications, and make it more accessible and more inclusive for the world around you. And it's such a blessing to work in this space. I mean, the stories and the people and all of it is so inspiring, so inspiring. I'll end with sharing a personal story. If there are any days, and burnout is a real thing, so I do want to acknowledge that. Be kind to yourself, take care of your mental health. You may be in a field that you love and you're very passionate about, but you still have to take care of yourself. And so for me, when I have my moments of burnout, I go back to this one experience. So I was sharing, right, my first project on accessibility was working with a local zoo. We interviewed different women with different types of visual disabilities, right, where someone may be completely blind, someone may be blind with just one eye. A lot of times within the disability space, there's a lot of assumptions made on different people's lived experiences. And honestly, disability can look very different, right? We talk about invisible and visible disabilities. Don't make an assumption just looking at someone what their lived experience might be. And so part of our challenge was making sure that we can encapsulate those different experiences as we speak to different people and account for that. My favorite day in this project was, towards the end of the project where we were sitting around the table and talking to these different women and sharing about their experiences of working with us. And one of them said to us, "Thank you for making us feel included, making us feel like we are important." And that day will always live with me. And that is what you can do for someone else by including their voice and making sure others are being heard.
Wow. What an amazing story, Nadita. When I listen to you speak, I can see the need for one, education, for people to understand the challenges that people with disabilities experience. Now, you identify as being disabled, you do not look it. So that's going to be another challenge for you. Can you explain to us what your disability is and how you've had to cope, especially in the workplace?
Yeah, and I'd love to touch on that. And while I explain that, I'd like to give a little bit more context on disability. So historically, right, the medical model of disability has been very prevalent, where we say that, oh, quote unquote, something's wrong with you or your body, and that's what's causing the disability. But the World Health Organization actually pivoted in the 2000s. They pivoted their description of how they define disability. It is now defined as the social model, where we say it's a mismatch between the person and the environment. So it's not the person that's disabled, but the environment is what is disabling the person. One example of that is I was born left handed, and I remember sitting in school where they had these right handed chairs, and I would have to hunch over and figure out how to write. Oh my God, that was so painful. Does that mean something's wrong with me? Am I disabled because I'm left handed and the chair is right handed? No, the chair, the environment is what disabled me, right? And so when we're thinking about these different situations, the environments, the designs, the things we create could enable and disable someone, right? That's what's causing the disability. For me personally, it's a very similar situation with a very invisible disability where I have asthma. I have really severe asthma. So while I'm here in Seattle, Washington, with one of the cleanest airs on the planet, the AQI is okay and I can breathe. But if I travel to India, or if I travel to any countries or any places that are more dusty, or let's say there's a forest fire or the smoke, I have some very specific triggers that can cause my lungs to close up and not breathe. So it's specific, but it's also in the sense that as long as the environment is controlled, right? That's a good example of seeing the invisible disabilities. But that's what I experience in my lived experience.
Wow. It's interesting because, yeah, people will look at you. You can walk, you can talk, you can move. You look, in quotes, normal, but you have something that hinders you to just exist if the environment is not conducive. And that is the challenge that most people with disabilities experience, right? Neurodiversity is a big issue right now. People who just function differently, who see and perceive the world differently, who are affected by different types of stimulus. So I'm really glad that you've highlighted this to us today. Now, as an engineer, as a designer in the tech world, what should organizations be aware of when they are designing software? So if you were to work with a group of designers, for example, what kind of guidelines would you help put in place so that they deliver a product that is inclusive of anybody with a disability?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. And I get that one all the time. So, again, as an accessibility leader and as someone who works in this space, it's something that we see all the time. But accessibility isn't like, think about baking a cake, right? You're not going to just sprinkle something on top and it's going to taste like that, right? It's like um, you're baking something. You can't just sprinkle it on top. You have to bake it in, right? So it's very similar. I like giving the example or the analogy of a curry, right? If I'm making an Indian curry, I'm not just going to sprinkle the spice on the top, right? It has to be marinated and it has to be cooked. And that's when the goodness comes out, right? If you try and put it later, it's going to take you longer to fix it. And guess what? still not going to taste quite right. So similarly, accessibility is just like that. You can't just try and sprinkle it in the end, right? Because a lot of times it's going to take you longer and more resources to go make those changes. So when we're thinking about just maybe the design phase, I'll go a step back, right? When I'm looking at, again, as a product owner and someone who works in that space, I look at it as overall product making, right? So if you start from design, you start from UX research, even before design, to say, okay, have you interviewed people with disabilities? Have you baked their voice into the product? Have you spoken to them? Have you understood what their lived experiences are, right? And have you taken those insights and then informed your design? Then, within design specifically, are you thinking about different ways in which this can be represented, right? Are there different input modalities? For example, let's say like I'm having wrist pain and I don't want to type. Do I have an option to have voice input? Or am I forced to type? Is there only keyboards that allowed? Right? If someone doesn't want to use the mouse and they want to use a keyboard, is your software or application designed to only use keyboard? Right? So you're thinking about ways, different ways for people to come together. And you're not forcing them to only use one way or the other. Right? So this is very important to bake in the design process, because when you get to development and you get to the end portion where you're starting to test it, yes, look for accessibility then too, but there's a lot of decisions that could have changed before that would have just prevented you all this heartache later to have to go back and change again, right? And so every phase has its own space, and so making sure you're looking in each and every phase is so important.
I love that. You literally have to take a step back and work out all the permutations and the possibilities that are out there in terms of accessibility in a digital space. Now, let's talk a little bit about leadership. What is your view of leadership and effective leadership, especially in the D&I space?
I love that question. One thing that I've always thought of, and this has worked for me again as an accessibility leader myself, is sometimes you have to vary the style, right? Like you have to understand about what motivates someone and what gets someone excited. If it's the drive to bond, or depending on what is exciting for someone, you have to vary that accordingly. And that, to me, the communication piece of leadership is really, really vital, because sometimes you have to speak in terms of business metrics, sometimes you have to speak in terms of customer experiences, sometimes you have to speak in terms of data. And to be able to just adapting with that communication is so important, and just viewing it from that lens of being inclusive. Especially when we can't make assumptions about someone's lived experience. And you might, as a leader, you might be speaking to someone and you have no idea what their day has been like. You have no idea what's happening in their lived experience, right? So lead with empathy and have the communication style where you can adapt and modify based on who you're speaking to understand what really needs to happen.
Fantastic. Now, imposter syndrome. As a woman of color working in the tech space, what are the challenges you've experienced in terms of feeling like you are where you're supposed to be? And how have you overcome imposter syndrome in the workplace?
Gosh, I love that question. I don't think we talk about this enough, but for me, the imposter syndrome was real. I know there's a lot of times when I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure. Um, it happens. So I want to just go ahead and throw that out there. It's real. It happens. I experience it. In fact, I feel I live with it every single day. How I've overcome it personally is making sure that you're being very grounded. You're starting from a place of, okay, I know myself, I know my values, and the aspects I don't know about myself, I'm going to go learn, right? I'm going to invest some time to understand and just spend time with who I am and who I want to be, because that is going to instill a sense of self and a sense of confidence that no one's going to take away from you, right? And so your strength is going to come from you. I also want to acknowledge that not all the strength always comes from me, right? I have over time built a network of allies and mentors, and understand that there's not one person end all be all, right? There's not always one mentor. You want to be able to go seek out allies who are there to support you, and then in turn, right, you can be there to help support and push somebody else. And so for me, when there are times when my pot is empty and I'm not able to find that strength, I'm able to lean on others who can then help me and push me. Um, and it's magical, right? When that happens, it just causes this ripple effect. One of my favorite mentors, in fact, I really attribute joining Microsoft, even with him and because of him. He was there to push me and support me and push me to apply for all these roles. And he's like, no, 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 you need to do this. I was like, oh, I don't think I qualify. He's like, no, you qualify. You need to do it. Just do it. And after I got the job, I remember tearfully calling him, like, I can't believe it. I just got the job. And he's like, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, how can I ever thank you? And his words to me were, I want you to take this and push this forward for the next Nandita you meet in your life. And that will be thanks enough. Right. And so for me, every time I've done that, that's also actually helped with my imposter syndrome. Because it's like, okay, you know what? I see other people who are also being vulnerable and sharing their lived experiences on, oh my gosh, they think they have imposter syndrome. And from my lens, I'm like, no, you're perfect. You're amazing. What imposter syndrome? What are you talking about? And so it makes me also take a step back and reflect and understand, okay, you know what? Like, you're someone who really believes in me. So instead of me trying to only look from my lens, let me grab their lens and look at me from that lens. And that changes your perspective of how you even view yourself.
I love that. That change of perspective is everything. It really is that ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and look at things from a different lens. Now, what is the importance of women representing us on different boards in different organizations? I know you are a board member. Tell us about your role on a board, how you got that role, and the importance of being in that role.
Oh, I love that question. Oh my goodness. And this goes back to again giving back and being an active member of the communities that you care about. I'm a board member on the Next Gen board for Lime Connect, and it's an organization that serves students with disabilities and allies with disabilities. And the goal, our mission, is rebranding disability with achievement. And one of the reasons why I took up that position was, as you mentioned, we talked about representation. I want to be a part of shaping that accessible and that inclusive experience for students with disabilities that are going to join that platform for skill building, for finding roles, for leveling themselves up, for building communities. And I found a lot of amazing communities with joining Lamb Connect. And thank you to Susan for founding that organization. And it has been such a wonderful experience. And just seeing the impact of the work we do in building out the communities and impacting the lives of other students. My biggest one is I'm a Google Lime scholar, and Lime, that's why I also joined Lime Connect, because Google, in conjunction with Lime, started that scholarship, and it helped me to finish my degree. And it was really important for me to kind of go back and be like, you know what, I want to be a part of shaping these other futures. And maybe if another Nandita comes by, I want to be part of her journey and her lived experience through whatever little steps I can take.
Oh, man, I love this. Now, you've just shared and given us a real gift. Tell us about the scholarship that you got. What is it called? How can people apply for it? And what kind of people can apply for it?
Absolutely. So the Google Lime Scholarship is hosted by Lime. I'm happy to also share the links as well, but it's a Lime Connect scholarship. You have to write some essays and you basically share your stories, and they look at your holistic profile and things like that. And, about just basically using your voice and the work you've done to be able to take the next step, in whatever that journey and whatever that career is. I think for me, it was also about um, being able to finish grad school. And that scholarship empowered me to finish my grad school. And so it's for students with disabilities in that space.
Absolutely wonderful. This is so good. You have certainly brought to us a whole wealth of knowledge, your expertise, your experience. What are your parting thoughts for us today, especially for people with disabilities, how they can cope and thrive in the workplace?
I think my parting advice, and this really applies to everyone watching this, if you identify as someone from the community, person with a disability, ally, whoever you are, leadership to me is not just about leading a team. It's about being a voice for those who are not being heard. And it's about being a voice to really empower other voices. And so I urge you, with whatever you do, whether it's technology, whether it's creative arts, whether it's social justice, whatever you do, find ways to uplift others. Find ways where you are using your voice for good. And if you work in the tech space like I do, find ways to make sure that in addition to all the interesting lenses you're wearing, where it's the creativity lens or the business lens or the financial lens, pick up that accessibility lens, pick up that inclusion lens, and you will see the magic of touching people's lives. You will see how you are a part of something so much bigger. Because when you touch someone's lives in that way, I've always heard this, and I really believe in this. People will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And when you make someone feel included, that is the most powerful feeling ever. So I urge you to do that for others.
Wonderful. Nadita, it's been an absolute honor connecting with you, speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your insights, your knowledge, your skills. I'm just going to share your website at the bottom of the screen if anybody wants to get in touch with you. You said you're available as a mentor, as a coach, as an ally. Please reach out and make use of this amazing gift that we've been given today. So I will be back again with yet another amazing guest. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Nadita, thanks again for this amazing interview.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care, everyone.
Bye for now, everybody. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely stay